Okay, pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And the roll call, please, for Bo's purpose. State your name and who you represent. Start.
John Cote, Pima County Election Integrity Commission.
Do you represent the Republican Party?
Yes.
Okay. Arnie?
Arnie Urken, the county administrator.
Steve Pothier, but I really don't know. Sure.
Jeff Rogers, I think I'm Supervisor District 2.
Levoy, Hurley, Supervisor District 4.
Chris Cole, Libertarian Party.
Brad Nelson, Elections Department.
And Barbara Tellman, Richard Elias District. Briefly, do we have any call to the public? No? And explain, Brian is sitting in the back because he is technically for a couple of days not on this commission. They didn't get his approval, but he will be approved next week.
Tuesday.
Okay.
So Brian gets a timeout.
So now, Bo, we would like to begin with having you tell us what is your role in the Secretary of State's office, what kinds of things are you doing, and who are your major people who work under you or with you?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. So I'm the new state elections director. I guess not so new anymore. It's already May, believe it or not. I came on board at the end of January with the rest of Secretary Hobbs' leadership team. And as the elections director, I oversee the Election Services Division in the Secretary of State's office. As you all are probably familiar with, we're responsible for a number of statewide duties, including managing the statewide voter registration database. That's one of our biggest priorities right now, is making sure that the new statewide voter registration database system, added, goes live well in advance of the 2020 election. So our current go-live date for that is September 2019. That's a slight delay from what was on the original development calendar, but I think it was inevitable given the election schedule from last year and the counties as well as our offices need to divert time and attention to the 2018 election and inability to at the same time focus on the development needs for this project. So that's our top priority here in the office for this year, is to make sure that launch is successful, because getting a functioning and improved voter registration database is crucial for the operations of our elections here. So that's one thing that our office or our division oversees. We also handle all of the campaign finance and lobbyist filings for statewide and legislative candidates on the campaign finance side, and then we enforce and handle the filing requirements for lobbyists, people who lobby the state legislature and state agencies and with other state employees. What else do we do? We handle processing for any statewide initiative, referendum, or recall petitions. We do the initial process. We are the filing office for those petitions. We do the initial processing, and then we pass on the statistical sample to the appropriate counties for signature verification. In connection with initiatives and referendum, we also compile and publish the publicity pamphlet, which contains arguments for and against the initiatives that will appear on the ballot. We hold ballot measures. We're required by statute to hold ballot measures town halls around the state as to ballot measures as well. I'm trying to think of the other large buckets of responsibility that we have. Of course, we do the election officer certification training every odd-numbered year and the recertification training. So this year we have the certification training in a one-week session in June, and then that session is repeated on a week in July for all state and local election officials. And then we do recertification training in September, and those will be hosted across the state. That's 2 days long for people who already have their certification. laundry list of things that our office does is we do the logic and accuracy testing of all the voting equipment before elections. We also certify any election equipment before they're able to be used in the state. So we just recently certified the latest suite from ES&S. Brad was at that meeting here in Phoenix, I think it's last month in April. So that's just a really high level overview of some of our office's main areas of responsibility. And I can pause for questions or go on to your next question.
Does anyone have a question? Have there been major staff changes at the top of some of these positions?
So far there's been significant continuity in the career staff here, and I'm just speaking for the elections division. The only change has been my role. So Eric Spencer was the prior elections director. Now I'm the elections director, but we maintain the same deputy elections directors, Janine Petty, and our election services manager, David Romney. So Janine kind of handles all of the voter registration and side of our work, and the parts of our work that involve the most interface and collaboration with the counties is largely on Janine's plate. She's very much the subject matter expert and project manager for the AVID, the new statewide voter registration database, and then David Romney, who is our election services manager. He is our point person in the office for the rest of what we do, such as the initiative and petition processing, campaign finance filings, lobbyist registrations, all those things that have less to do with the counties or require less interface with the counties on a day-to-day basis. That's on David's plate.
Were there any major changes in the IT staff and operation of the website?
There were no major changes in the IT staff. In terms of the operation of the website, we are looking at my division, the election. So IT and the Secretary of State's office is a separate division, and they serve all the divisions within the Secretary of State's office, not just elections. So elections is working with IT to update the website and update and implement necessary upgrades to all the elections-related IT projects, such as the election management system, election night reporting, and campaign finance filing system. We're doing a revamp of the campaign finance, this like public-facing campaign finance portal, which the prior administration had called See the Money. They had outsourced that to a third-party vendor, and it didn't go well, so it came back to the agency, and now we're working internally with our own IT department to fix the issues there and relaunch it.
Excellent, thank you. Any questions, anybody? Okay, so please go into some more detail about what's happening with the procedures manual and what will be the public participation aspect of that.
Mm-hmm. So the procedures manual is the second, probably right on par with the successful launch of the voter registration database. It's one of our top priorities. One of my top priorities, was taking up a big chunk of my time every day, is updating the procedures manual. So I've been in constant consultation and communication with the county recorders and the county elections departments about the procedures manual, and it's the approach that we've kind of landed on and have been using is an iterative process where I give, small bits. I'm working on the manual, updating the manual chapter by chapter, and I send the draft of each chapter to the county as I get it done, so that they're getting it in small bits instead of the whole manual all at once, so that they can review each piece thoroughly and provide me thorough feedback and comments, and then I respond to each comment that I get from every county as to whether it's incorporated, and if it's not incorporated, why, and whether it's something that I think should be discussed with all counties. So I flag all of those. So the process has been, I send out a chapter, I give the counties, a deadline to send me their comments, my edits on that chapter, I incorporate it, I write up my responses to each of the county's comments. I circulate everything back to the counties with a red line draft of the updated updates I made in response to their comments, and then we have a call to discuss any outstanding issues or anything that I think would benefit from a group discussion and group consensus in terms of how we want to approach it in the manual, and then I make final edits and turn that back around, move on to the next chapter and repeat the process. So it's been a very collaborative process. I've really appreciated the careful attention and thorough feedback and constructive feedback that I've gotten from the counties on what we've done so far. So in terms of status, I think we have about a third of the manual out to the counties for comment right now. We've done the full feedback and editing process as to chapter 1, which is a sizable chapter. It's on voter registration. And now the counties have chapter 2 and 3, which is on early voting and all ballot by mail elections. And I'm working on the next chapter, chapter 4, which for the draft that I'm doing is covering voting equipment. So in that chapter, it covers security procedures for voting equipment, election equipment certification by the state, and then LNA testing. So I hope to get that out to the counties next week, and then we'll move on to the next chapter, so it'll just keep going that way. And in terms of overall timeline, my goal is to get a full draft compiled with county feedback incorporated by mid to late July, and then post that on the Secretary of State's website for public comment. And then we'll open up a 3 to 4 week, I'm hoping for 4 weeks, depending on when we actually get the full draft compiled, a 3 to 4 week public comment period when any member of the public, the political parties, nonprofit organizations, anyone really, the cities and towns can send comments to a dedicated inbox at the Secretary of State's office, and then we will take all of those comments and review them and incorporate what we can, and then host a public meeting where we can answer questions. And the plan is that in advance of the public meeting, I'll release an updated draft that incorporates the public comments, and then we'll have the public meeting and can answer questions about that latest draft. And then after the public meeting, I think I'll send the draft out. Let's give the counties the opportunity to provide final feedback on it before we finalize and submit to the Attorney General and the Governor's office. So the plan is to get a draft to the AG and the Governor by the end of August, early September, so that we can meet this new legislation that just passed that now requires our office to get a draft to the Attorney General and the Governor's office for review by October 1st. And we certainly plan to meet that statutory deadline, if not do it much sooner.
So are you working from the 2014 version as your base?
We are kind of working from both the 2014 and the 2018 draft that the prior administration issued. So this was a topic of much discussion when we first came on board, was what to do, whether to start with the 2014 draft or to use the 2018 draft as a baseline. And I think my view, and there was considerable agreement from the counties as well, is that a lot of time and energy was spent on the 2018 draft, even though it never made it to the finish line, and even though there was a lot of criticism and just valid critiques of both the process and the substance of the 2018 draft. But it's easier to cut than it is to write from scratch, and at the very least, I think the prior administration took care to incorporate updates in the law from 2014 on through 2018 into that draft, and the counties also spent a lot of time looking at that draft and identifying what they felt was missing or was overreached, so they could point me to those critiques and we could implement them more swiftly than going back to to scratch and starting over. So that's what we've been doing. I've been using the 2018 draft as what I'm editing, but it's being pretty significantly edited with an eye towards incorporating what was in the 2014 draft that the counties liked and found useful that didn't make it into the 2018 draft, and then cutting out a lot of what was in the 2018 draft that seemed to be unnecessary and, spelled out more detail than needed to be helpful to the counties.
Are you a one-person operation, or do you have a staff helping you?
I wish I had a staff. we we have a staff here in the elections division, and I've been utilizing the staff as much as I can, but this project is largely on my plate. So with me consulting the staff based on their areas of expertise, but because the manual is so county focused, there are significant chunks of it that our staff just have very little experience with. That I'm really turning a lot to the counties for feedback on that.
Anybody?
When you say you're consulting with the county, is it just the recorders or is it also with Brad?
The county recorders and the election directors. So it just so happened that the first sections that we did were more recorder focused, so more of the feedback came from recorders, but now we're moving into election day operations and election equipment, and I anticipate more constant communication with the elections directors.
I sent you a list of questions. Do you want to just look at those, answer those one by one?
Yeah, sure. So we talked about whether the approach, and what will the significant changes entail. So far, it's largely been, the formatting is different, less reliance on footnotes, less subsections, numbering differently so that you don't have, section 4.8.5.2.1.1 reference to the different sections, and I think just a change in tone to make it more of a layman's terms how to rather than legalese in the language. So that's kind of overall formatting and tone changes. Then I think my approach to has been to spell things out where helpful but not where it's unnecessary. So a lot of, I think before it was kind of written as a restatement of the law with a lot of background in it as opposed to a manual for election administrators. So we're reverting back to the how-to manual approach. Then the substantive changes to the voter registration chapter, which has been the most significant piece that we've been working on, that was completely, I feel like that whole section has been completely changed from what it was in both the 2014 draft that's currently in effect as well as the 2018 draft that was worked on last year, because so much has changed in the law in the last year. So the biggest change is incorporating the LULAC consent decree. I don't know how familiar people are with that. Brad, should I give a bit of a summary or?
Yes, please do. We have some new members, so we appreciate it.
Okay, great. So for the LULAC case involved a challenge to our state's procedures for implementing the documentary proof of citizenship requirement for voter registration with the state form. So as I'm sure most of the people in the room are aware, we have a bifurcated registration system here in Arizona. We have federal-only voters and then full ballot voters. So before the LULAC addendum and the procedure as spelled out in the 2014 manual that is currently in effect, implements that bifurcated structure by requiring, so if you register with a state form, you had to provide documented proof of citizenship. Otherwise, the form was rejected entirely. So if you submitted the state voter registration form, you had everything else on there that was needed to process the form. You signed the affirmation that you are a citizen, you will be 18 by the next election, If there's no proof of citizenship and one acceptable form of proof of citizenship is providing a valid driver's license number that doesn't match up against a foreign type license number, but if that wasn't provided, then the form would be rejected entirely, and you would then have to submit a new form by the voter registration deadline in order to be registered to vote for the next election. But if you registered with a federal form, you could submit the federal form without any documentary proof of citizenship so long as you sign the attestation, so as you meet all the federal requirements for registration. Then you would be registered as a federal-only voter so that you would get a federal-only ballot, which means you can only vote for federal races, not any state races or ballot initiatives. doing for the federal forms is the people registered with those forms, their information was being checked against the MVD database, and if there was an MVD, if there was a true match against an MVD record for that person, then their driver's license number would be imported into their voter registration record, which would then allow them to be full ballot voters, because now we had proof of statutorily sufficient proof of citizenship for those voters, but we were not doing the same for people who registered with state forms. So the challenge was to this differential treatment of people who register with state forms versus federal forms. So you could have a person with entirely the same circumstances, the only difference being which piece of paper they use. One would be registered at minimum as a federal-only voter, with the possibility of being upgraded to a full ballot voter if we were able to acquire a driver's license number for that person. So that's if you registered with the federal form, but if you use the state form, you could be in the exact same circumstances, but have your registration rejected entirely. So that was a clear, a significant due process and equal protection issue, and that was the basis of the LULAC lawsuit. And under the consent decree that was entered by the court in 2018, the agreement, the requirement under that consent decree was now that we would treat all registrants the same no matter what form they used. So we would use, no matter what form you used, if you did not provide documentary proof of citizenship, your information would be checked against the MVD database if we're able to acquire a driver's license number for you. And that driver's license number doesn't indicate that you hold an F-type license, which is issued to people who are non-citizens, then you would be registered and as a full ballot voter. If there's no driver's license number for you, then you'd be registered as a federal-only voter because you meet all the federal requirements for registration, and you would get a notice from the county recorder that says you've been registered as a federal-only voter. If you provide proof of citizenship by 5 p.m. on the Thursday before the election, then you'll be upgraded to a full ballot voter so you can get a full ballot. So now we're just implementing that. The whole chapter has been revamped to implement those new procedures, and quite frankly, I think it just results in simpler and cleaner processing of voter registrations because you're not treating different pieces of paper differently. Now we just have a uniform procedure for all voter registration processing, no matter what form is used, and we are checking the MVD database for driver's license numbers for everyone so that we can acquire the driver's license number and upgrade people to full ballot voters where appropriate. So that's a major change to this manual. Some other significant changes so far have been just incorporating recent legislative changes. As you are also probably familiar, the legislature passed a number of pieces of legislation that impact early voting and emergency voting. So those changes have been incorporated. One being, so 1054 is the bill that provides for the uniform extended cure period for inconsistent signature issues on early ballots. Everyone now has 5 days past the election for a race with for an election with a federal race on it, 3 days for any other election to cure any signature issues on the ballot to get it counted. And then there are new ID requirements. So previously, if you voted early in person or at any early voting location or at an emergency voting center or via a ballot that was delivered by a special election board, you didn't have to show ID. The identity verification mechanism or procedure was through the signature verification process, but now through 2 pieces of legislation, so 1072 and 1090, you now have to show ID the same as you would have to do on election day if you vote early in person through any in-person early voting location. So we've incorporated that into there. And then one issue that I'm looking forward to discussing with the counties when we get to discussing Chapter 2, which is now in their hands for review and edit, is what to do in terms of signature verification for the people who voted early in person. So the purpose of signature verification is to verify ID. And the people who vote in person going forward now will have to show verified ID before they even get a ballot. So the signature verification is kind of redundant. And the question in my mind arises, what do we do with that voter who voted early in person, show their ID to get their ballot, so they've already verified their identity, but then, you know, in the signature verification process, the person confirming the signature decides for whatever reason that the signature doesn't match. I think there would be significant due process issues if that ballot gets thrown out solely because the signature doesn't match when the person has already verified ID. So we're trying to work out a process that can be applied statewide to reconcile those requirements.
Very
And then,
interesting.
yeah, in terms of early or emergency voting, there's 1090 shifted the authority to authorize emergency voting centers from the county recorder to the board of supervisors for the county. So now there has to be a specific resolution from the board of supervisors to authorize emergency voting, the creation and hours of operation of emergency voting centers. So that's been incorporated through the emergency voting section, along with the ID requirement. And people who vote at an emergency voting center now are required by statute to sign a statement under penalty of perjury, attesting to the fact that they've experienced an emergency that prevents them from appearing at the polls on election day before they can be given a ballot at an emergency vote center. So that's another legislative change that's been incorporated. Another significant change that I anticipate incorporating into the procedures manual is developing a procedures for a on-screen adjudication board that is comparable to a duplication board. So the latest suite voting system from ES&S that was certified by the Secretary of State in April has on-screen adjudication capability, and that capability, so just to back up a little bit for people who might not be familiar, this deals with ballots where there are overvotes or undervotes that can't be tabulated through the regular tabulation process. It has to be reviewed by a board to determine the voter intent because it's not clear from the ballot itself. So if somebody, you know, fills in the bubble for 2 candidates for senator, but crosses one out and writes yes next to the other one, then that's a clear expression of voter intent that they wanted to vote for the first person, but the tabulator wouldn't be able to pick that up because both bubbles were filled. So under the prior procedure, you had a duplication board that consists of members who would review that and determine what the voter intent is and then duplicate the ballot, and then the duplicated ballot would be what is sent through the tabulator. Now there's a capability in the new election program from ES&S to do that on screen and make the selection on screen as opposed to a physical duplication. So we're exploring how the certification of this capability was contingent on procedures being spelled out in the procedures manual for the use of that on-screen adjudication program. So our office is researching what other states are doing, what procedures that other states that have used this since we've never used this before, what procedures they've put in place, what security measures they've put in place, and trying to just get a feel for best practices. We'll be probably reaching out to election directors around the state to get their feedback as well so that we can put together a section on that new process. So there's that as well.
Wow. Anybody question at this point? Attorney
Could you
Urken speaking.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Could you comment on the standard of verification related to on-screen verification compared to the state-of-the-art in used by vendors such as Clear Ballot? Is the same level of detail in scanning and interpreting the signature?
screen adjudication that I'm talking about is not for signature verification, it's for overvotes, undervotes, write-in candidates, and blank ballots.
I'm sorry, yeah, but for
So what?
the detail regarding the interpretation of the marks on the ballot, is that detail at the level of the clear ballot analysis?
I'm not sure, I'm not familiar with the clear ballot analysis, but I've gotten a walkthrough or a demo of the functionality, and so in short, on a high level, the way it works is the system scans the image of the ballot, and then you can pull it up on the screen and see it, enlarge it, zoom in, zoom out, do whatever you need to do, and then the adjudication board would make a determination as to who the vote should go for, if anyone, and select that on the screen, and then it would save that, and then you could produce an audit log of all the board selections, and that would then be tabulated.
I think there's a lot of detail here that I'd like to explore further, but why don't we move on to the next issue?
Okay, so I talked about legislative changes, possible changes to the hand-count procedures. I haven't gotten to that section yet, but if there are suggestions or thoughts about what's in the 2014 manual or the 2018 draft that was circulated last year, I'm definitely open to hearing that feedback and trying to incorporate it, working to incorporate it into that section when we get to it.
Thank you. Next.
Any changes to be made to accommodate legal decisions? Yeah, so we talked about that. When will drafts be available? We talked about that. I'm hoping to make it available in mid to late July for the public to view. It will be posted on our website, and it will come out as a complete draft. So the plan for the mid to late July is to have a complete draft available for public comment. I might, depending on where we are in June, post like the first half of the manual if we have that ready, just to give the public some more time to digest it all, because I know it's a large and complicated document. And the public participation process, as we also already discussed briefly, will involve being able to review the draft, send our office comments to a dedicated inbox, and then participate in a public meeting about the manual. And I think that's it.
Okay, I have one more general philosophical question. Some of us sent detailed comments to the 2018 version and got very little response, but the little response we did get was in areas where we thought the Pima County procedures for processing ballots were much more detailed than other counties were using, and we suggested moving up the standard. And the philosophy was, the response was, well, they're not doing it anywhere else, so why should they do it anywhere? So it was basically moving down the standard rather than up.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have any response?
So we have, I've been trying to collect and consolidate the comments received previously, but they were voluminous and what's back here. So if you want to send me your comments, if this committee sends comments that you felt weren't adequately considered by the prior administration, I'd be happy to take a look at your comments now and respond to them as appropriate.
But in terms of the general approach, the feeling that we had was that if it's Maricopa County is doing it, they shouldn't be required to do anything more than they are now, basically. Even if it's in the law.
Well, my philosophical approach is to comply with the law.
Okay.
So we're trying to, and I do understand that some counties have much more thorough and detailed procedures than other counties, and there's significant variation between the counties in terms of size and issues that you all face in administering elections and the resources that you have available to address those issues. So we're mindful of that, but to the extent that it's possible, my philosophical approach is to put in procedures that will make voting more accessible and be more protective of the voters' right to vote as much as possible. So I am taking a lot from the larger counties that may have more developed procedures so that we can level up as opposed to leveling down.
Thank you. One specific area was duplicating ballots, and Pima County has set very specific criteria of what you do in case A, case B, case C, etc. And other counties were much more informal about it. That was one example.
Yeah, so I think I've been thinking a lot about that actually, because I would love to be able to share the more detailed procedures that Pima and Maricopa especially, and some of the other more medium-sized counties have as well, and you know, improve procedures and improve uniformity and consistency statewide. The question is whether the procedures manual is the appropriate place to put all of those details. As you all understand, anything that's in the procedures manual, once it's signed by the Attorney General, the Governor, has the force of law that comes with criminal penalties for violation of those provisions. So there's a lot of concern, I think, about that and whether it makes sense to put such a high level of detail into the manual, and I'm sympathetic to that. So I think there's other ways that we can share and spread the good procedures that have been implemented in certain counties over to others that may not necessarily require including them in the manual. The manual is pretty long as it is, and putting in more details I think might be detrimental in terms of just bogging it down and making it so long that it's not useful or helpful as a quick reference. So I think one of our office's priorities, so probably the third major priority for office in addition to the voter registration database and the procedures manual, is improving our relationships with the counties and other stakeholders in election administration. And hopefully with that improved relationship, we can work collaboratively to implement these consistent and better procedures across the state voluntarily without having to put it into the manual, even to changing the way they do things, but just to work together in pursuit of our shared interest of improving election administration. And I think we've come a long way in the 4 short months that we've been in office in rebuilding relationships with the counties and restarting dialogue and collaboration and information sharing. So we hope to improve procedures that way as well, not just through the procedures manual.
Great, thank you. Arnie?
Yeah, I have a question about your thinking regarding the auditing of voter registration data in the state, and also tracking how it's distributed and sold and shared outside the state. Do you have any personal opinions about that issue? I imagine it's not in the procedures manual yet, but do you have any ideas about that?
So the voter registration, our voter registration list is a public record, and we, just in the time that I've been in the office, have received numerous requests for it already, and it's our obligation under the public records law to produce it after redacting protected information. So I'm not sure if I'm answering the question, but I think we view it as a public record, and we produce it when requested as required by the public records law.
But you put no constraints on the distribution, tracking, and auditing and use of the information once you comply with the public records law?
There's and a part of the public records law is a restriction on commercial use of the voter registration list. So that's we enforce and confirm before we produce the list.
Do you track the use of that information by online vendors who collect and package information to support targeting of voters?
To my knowledge, we don't. I don't think that's something that our office has the capability to do.
Do you think it should?
Or would the law allow you to do that?
Would it
I guess
prevent you?
I honestly haven't thought about this issue, so I'm thinking out loud now. And I'm not sure how that would work out, practically speaking. Would we require people who request the list to report to us what they do with it? How would we monitor what they do once it's out of our hands? There's, researchers request it, campaigns request it, nonprofit groups request it for their own purposes. I think it would be extremely resource intensive to track what they do with the list.
Thank you. Brian, did you have any, you can ask questions? No? Brad has a comment?
But it's not about the procedures manual, so I don't want to move off the procedures manual if somebody has a
I think we're pretty well done with that.
I had one, this is Steve Pothier. I like that you were paying attention to the potential problem of having an in-person ID and then a signature verification afterwards and those being in conflict. Any thought to allowing the conflict to exist and using it as a way of helping to verify the signature or verification process?
Can you say some more about that?
Yeah, so if someone has gone in person and their ID has been confirmed, and then the signature verification says, oh, no, it's not verified, that would indicate that the signature verification made a mistake. And perhaps just because the signatures on file are really poor. And that would be very useful information to help improve the signature verification process. So leaving it in place and finding these conflicts, as long as you still accept the non-signature ID, would help improve the system, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a great thought, and definitely worth exploring. So something that I've talked to a number of county recorders about is in that circumstance where the person has already verified ID, and I worked this into the early voting chapter, that the county recorder be permitted to take the signature from the early ballot affidavit and update that voter's file with that new signature once they've already verified ID in person. But tracking the number of times that happens, I think, and looking at the determination would be a good post-election kind of cleanup audit process to identify what can be done to improve the signature verification process.
And are you thinking of the problems of people signing electronically on tablets or whatever, and their signature bears little resemblance to any other signature?
Yes, it's always a problem. I am guilty of the same thing.
Okay, Brian had something to say.
No.
Brad. Oh, Brad.
You made Brian wake up at the back of the room now.
Brad.
Bo, can you hear me?
Yep.
Where are we on budgeting for reimbursement to the counties for the presidential preference election?
Yes. Where are we? So there's a lot of rumors here that we expect a budget from the legislature next week. As I think you know, Brad, the counties and Secretary of State's office requested $10 million for reimbursement for the TPE. However, there's been some pushback from the legislature on that figure because of the possibility that the Republican Party might not participate in the PPE. So we've been requested, and the county, actually, it's been Jen Morrison who's been collecting the data from the counties as to what the cost would be, anticipated cost would be if the Republican Party did not participate. And we've been trying to explain to the legislature that just because one party doesn't participate doesn't mean that it cuts the cost in half, because there are significant fixed costs that exist no matter how many parties participate. So we've given updated figures based on what we project the cost would be with just one major party participating, and hopefully we'll get an adequate appropriation to properly reimburse the county. But I don't anticipate knowing that until the earliest, probably late next week.
I hear rumors that the PPE may be all mail, is that correct?
That's another piece of information that we've given the legislature, is the cost of implementing the PPE all traditionally via in-person voting or doing it all mail, and what the cost savings would be to doing the PPE all by mail.
Thank you, I'm satisfied.
Thank you very much. It's very detailed and helpful and very encouraging.
A big improvement on Mr. Spencer, I'll tell you that.
Everybody around the table is smiling.
Yeah, and you guys, Brad knows how to get in touch with me. You all have my email. We deeply mean it when we say we value feedback and we value collaboration and we value the insight that you all have from being on the ground and in the trenches. So don't hesitate to reach out if you have thoughts and feedback that you want to share with our office.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I look forward to seeing you all in person when the secretary heads down to Pima County.
And that's probably June or July sometime?
I think it'll be July or August.
Okay. We look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
What a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And I think we have very little else to do on this agenda. Proposed legislative changes, that's Bill, and he's no longer with us.
I have an item that I want
You have one?
to bring
Okay.
in. Senate Bill 1154 passed the Senate yesterday 24-2 and is on its way to the governor. That will move the primary election to the first Tuesday in August.
That'll be effective this year?
Yes.
Well, it is this year. Well, the big one difference, yeah.
There you go.
Never mind.
Okay, John Cote is not here, so we don't have that.
He's on the
Oh, are you
phone.
on the phone? John, are you still there? We turned it off. He didn't speak up about
I'm sorry.
We'll move that to next month.
Okay.
And conversation with the recorder, Brian attempted, yes?
Not from the recorder, going back to Brad's point on Bill, whatever, if that's signed by the governor, it becomes effective 90 days after signature or 90 days after
Absent
signature.
an emergency clause, that's true.
So it wouldn't apply to primaries in local elections this year, but would become effective next year.
In very informal discussions with Roger Randolph, I think that's true.
Okay, sorry, John, we'll put you out to next month.
I think John was gonna put that one off till next time anyway.
Okay, we're conversation with the recorder, we have nothing to report.
Not so far.
Okay. Future agenda items?
I didn't get the comment about the recorder. Is there a timetable for doing something?
Brian?
Can you ask that question again, Ernie? Is there a timetable?
Yeah.
It's based on her availability and our flexibility. She's expressed a willingness to do the presentation anywhere at any time, but she'd like to do it before a significant audience. And given the fact that over a third of this group has already seen her presentation at least once, I've seen it 4 times, there may be a little bit of pushback from her. I haven't heard that, but that's a possibility. I think basically she's
There's
doing it
also
for...
the issue of, it's not just seeing her presentation, it's talking to Chris Rhodes.
I wasn't told that...
Well, we had all those questions that we submitted before. There was some discussion of which of those questions could be answered or would be answered.
Right,
We
and
heard
the
clarification.
task that I was given, and after last month, I'm very specific about the task, was to ask the recorder to specifically do her presentation on her analysis of the past election. Nothing to do with Chris Rhodes.
I think if you go back, you'll find it was more than just the presentation.
But that's going back quite a ways. I think
Yeah.
Brian's talking about the portion from last meeting.
Right.
Okay, we'll still keep working on the recorder. Future agenda items? I'd like to try to start putting in some information about the city election as it's developed. And I think a couple of us will be, as individuals, observing the city election and start having something to report.
What's the date of the primary? I'm sorry.
I don't know.
Sometime in August. I
Yeah.
don't remember exactly.
Late
when.
August. Okay, thank you.
And it's all one man.
Yes.
Yeah.
10 weeks.
Can I request that,
Wait, yeah.
I'm sorry,
No, go ahead.
can I request that,
Yeah.
once you've been certified as a member, that you follow up on trying to get answers to the questions we previously submitted to the recorder?
I got a call. John was trying to get back in on the phone.
Oh,
Is it possible to turn it back on or?
I have no idea.
Right, I can turn my phone on speaker, I guess.
Do I just put it on speaker?
Disconnect us?
Let me, John, I'm gonna try to put you on my phone on speaker.
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot. I forgot.
All right, John's on speaker. John, you there, John?
Barely.
Yeah.
Sorry, John, apologize.
Hang on, John, we're gonna connect you back up.
Hang on a second, we disconnected everything, so let me call back in and we should be good.
Guys, just hang on a second, I'll let you know when he's back up.
You want me to try to call back in?
Yeah,
Just Mike.
Yeah, just a second. He's gotta get the system back up.
Welcome to Shore Teleconferencing. Please enter an access code, then press pound.
Take me off the speakerphone.
All right, you're off.
You are the only person on this conference. Please stay on the line.
I think she could.
Okay, you're up.
Okay, you can dial back in now.
Barbara? Brad has copies or drafts of chapters 1 and 2, I believe, of the procedures manual. Is there anything that prevents him from sharing those with this commission?
Guess we'd have to ask Brad.
And if he can,
Yeah,
would he?
wait till he comes back. Good idea. Does it make a sound? What do you sound?
It will, indeed.
There we go.
Hi, John.
Howdy, folks.
I
I
apologize.
know you're angry with me, but don't hang up.
No, but I was just gonna say, I apologize. You were so silent, I forgot you were there, and I apologize.
We'll make up for that.
Okay, do you want to go on to your proposed solutions to processing delays now, or?
Well, you know what, I'm not there, and it's very hard to do anything over the phone. I think we should just go on and talk about that. Maybe Brad has some information. Last we spoke of it, he was going to speak to the software folks about what they had and what he thought about it, what they would tell him. As you know, as I said to Brad, I think I said to the commission, I didn't feel it was in my purview or our purview as we were looking at this, the three of us, that we should call and
purview. Signature verification is not my purview, so I am going to decline to do any research on this particular topic.
Okay, all right,
So do
that's
you,
fine.
so do you wish to do the research and report to us next time?
Yeah, we'll give them a call and see what they have to say. I don't think the recorder uses that information, that service, do they not, Brad?
I have no idea. I won't speak for the recorder.
Okay, all right. Their software is not provided by them. Do you know that one way or another?
I do not.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll follow up on it ourselves and we'll go from there.
And we'll put it on the June agenda.
Yeah, put us on the next agenda. Regarding the gal that just spoke, I thought that was a pretty interesting briefing. May I speak to that before we move to the next subject?
Well, there is no next subject, so I guess, is this still part of the open meeting law? Is it still on the previous agenda item? We're okay?
You did cut John off.
Yeah, I'm talking about the woman who called in.
Yeah.
She hung up, and then when she hung up, I was gone. And so I don't know how that got closed out, but I think we're capable to make discuss that under the open meeting law.
Okay,
Her
go ahead.
conversation.
Go ahead.
I stayed off, did not ask questions. Michael Day will verify to you that he asked me not to try and ask any questions while she was chatting. He felt like it would be, it was hard to hear on this end, and it might be difficult for everybody else and her as well. But I thought I wanted to verify. I thought I heard her say she was redoing the elections manual, and basically they're redoing it with in-house staff and with some consultations from people like Brad and the recorders. Was that correct?
Yes, she seems to be intensely working with all the county election people, recorders and election staff.
Okay, and as I understood it, Brad had been to a meeting with her already about that?
This is Brad. The answer is no. I happen to be sitting next to Belle at a meeting of a completely different topic, so it was
Okay.
not about that topic.
And
Okay, all right.
She stressed
All right.
that the first chapter is all in the recorder's purview, so the recorders are the ones she's been dealing with up to this point primarily.
Okay, all right, so let me stumble on through this, as I'm sort of new to this, although I've been trying to bring myself up fully to speed. I was not aware that we had a 2018 draft. I guess somehow I missed that. That must have been before I came on the commission. Do we have a copy of a 2018 draft?
No, it was never approved by the Attorney General and the Governor, so it did not get anywhere. It had major problems.
Okay, all right. So it was never published, but she said she was marking that up as that was kind of her beginning spot, along with the 2000 and I want to say 16, but it's maybe 14.
14.
I've forgotten what that cover sheet on that recorder's manual says. Is that correct?
Yes, that's the one that's in effect now, since the 18 was not approved.
Right, okay. So, and then I think I heard her say that she was willing for us as a commission to make some suggestions.
Right.
Was that correct?
Correct, when the public comment period opens, probably late July, August sometime.
I didn't hear her qualify that to the public comments only. I heard her say what I just said. She was open to our submitting to her suggestions for the recorder's manual.
I think she was, but if we haven't seen what they're proposing, it's a little difficult to comment on it. Wait, Arnie has something to say.
But I think John is correct that she did, at the end, in the second part of the conversation, invite people to make suggestions in general.
Yeah, I think she went back to the fact that this group had submitted some comments previously, and she said, I think she said she had not looked at it, but if we wanted to resubmit, basically resubmit those things, that she'd take a look at. I think that's what I heard.
Now, the group did not submit comments, Danny White and I submitted comments as individuals.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, I understood that she was open to the commission somehow getting a quasi-official status so that we could comment along the same lines as the election and recorders departments. But I don't remember that.
I got out of it, which is why I'm having this discussion. That
But
was
I-
my
Ladies,
opinion as well, but I couldn't.
John, may I finish, please?
Chris was speaking.
But
I'm sorry.
I don't think that was explicit. That was just what I heard and understood. I would like us to have something like that because I think with the wide variety of people here, we come up with some interesting perspectives.
And maybe this gets back to the question Brian had of Brad.
Can you share the draft of the chapters that she sent to you already with this commission? Or is that something that she's asking you
I
to
can
do?
get them. She sent chapters 1 and 2 that specifically are about the recorder's offices
Right.
and their operations. I did not receive those since I don't do that work, but I'm certain that I can get those.
If
But can you give those to us, or are they private?
I will ask Ms. Dole what she wants to do.
Thank you. Okay, John, anything else?
Well, I was going to suggest, if we could, that we ask her if we can become a part of that. I think we're the only county in the state that has this kind of a commission, so she's not familiar with us, and people in Maricopa tend to ignore us anyway. But maybe we should propose that we write her a letter and ask her if we can become involved at the same level the recorders and the directors of elections are. We have oversight for that, and I think we would provide, as Chris, I think it was Chris, it's hard to tell over the phone, but as Chris suggested, provide a variety of ideas and suggestions.
Maybe Brad, when you talk to her about getting the other chapters and whether they're public, could you bring that issue up?
Sure.
So we'll
Well,
leave that up to
I'm
Brad.
suggesting that our chairman, if that's you, Barbara, write her a letter and make that request formal and let's just get into it and get on with it. And I would like for Brad, of course, to brief her about how our conversation went. And, I'm sure this is that's a difficult process, rewriting that manual.
It is, and it's very tedious to read it.
Yeah.
Extremely tedious. The last one was 400 and something pages long.
409, I think. Yeah.
And I am not the chair. Brian is the chair of the next meeting.
Yeah, but you're the chairing this meeting, are you not?
I'm chairing this meeting, but I'm not the chair.
Well, you are in his absence, are you not?
Oh, if you want to put
You're
one in.
acting.
Today.
So all I'm suggesting is I would like for, we don't have I don't know if we have a consensus there, but I would, if there's any thought about doing this, including Brian, and I'm not trying to cut Brian out, he just forced to sit in the corner while he was bad, and I'm just making that's a joke, Brian, and that we just go ahead and get that moving, because public offices and those kinds of things are like molasses. They move very slowly.
Yeah, but we can't do anything today because of the open meeting law. This is not on the agenda.
Well, that's not on the agenda to write and ask that after that is on the agenda. We just heard her presentation, and we could write and ask. What violation of the open meeting law
response here?
I see no problem to offer our service as a review body. I mean, she accepted or rejected it as she sees fit.
In the past, we have felt that since we are advisory to the Board of Supervisors, it was a little out of our purview, and so those of us who really wanted to do it, did it as individuals. Not that it mattered to the previous Secretary of State. Wouldn't have mattered either way.
Well,
Well, let's see what this particular Secretary of State has to say. And you know, this notion of integrity in the elections is important. That's all we've argued about on a national level here for 2 years now, 2+ years. And it looks like it's going to continue right on into 2020 and beyond. Probably we'll still be fussing about this when we're all in our graves. But it seems to me we should be proactive in this, and we should do that. But that's collectively for the group to decide.
does the Board of Supervisors have any input or say or approval or any official function in terms of the procedures manual?
Only through the election and recorder department.
In the statute that pertains to the drafting and publication of the procedurals manual, it states, and this isn't an exact quote, that the Secretary of State shall have conversations/communications with the counties. Doesn't necessarily say the Board of Supervisors, just as the counties. And then after that input from the counties, the Secretary of State will draft and issue a procedures manual. Doesn't mean she has to pay any attention to it.
No, but I'm thinking, since we're supposedly advisors to the Board of Supervisors, if they have any official function in this, that's our in on, as a body, having input into the procedures manual, so that we can advise the Board of Supervisors on what the procedures manual is and is doing.
Actually, I think what he said, conversations with the counties, is a pretty broad statement.
I know.
So I think that.
I was looking for a way for us to put our oar in.
But there's nothing in what you said about collective response. Individual responses are possible. There's nothing about collective response at all.
No.
I'm afraid my skepticism is based on, I wonder how many of people on this commission would read much of the manual in
Well, I
detail.
hope it's better written than the last one. That was the best sleeping pill I've ever had.
The last one was pretty bad too, in terms of, yeah, we just stick with it.
Well, I'm often a fan of the word that two heads are better than one, even if they're cabbages. And there might be some significant things in there that Steve sees, or that Arnie sees, or that you see. Barbara, you've spent seemed like a couple of weeks back there in the county room with you. And you, as you aptly pointed out, some of Maricopa's processes are probably sloppy and could use Brad up there to clean them up. But I think the Secretary of State's going to do what they damn well please, no question about it. But maybe we could help give them some ideas. I can't see anything but positive coming out of this, but maybe we don't want to do that. I just, as a group, we need to be active and we need to be smart and we need to do what we can do to increase the validity of the perceived validity, for sure, of the election. I don't want to use the word integrity again, but I guess I should, that meaning that.
Yeah.
So,
I think we have a comment here.
The manual's long.
Very long.
Okay, but we don't necessarily, as Ms. Dahl said, she's doing it in chunks. I think we would just do the same thing. Just do it kind of chunks, kind of along the same schedule that she's doing it. We don't know her schedule, but we can imagine what it is. Look at a chunk at a time and make some comments, throw her away. It's much better to get comments in earlier in the cycle as you can than down the road when they finished all their work. And now we're coming along, or anybody's coming along, public comments part. Most of those public comments frankly get thrown out in my experience of what he saying. In fact, that was one of the comments of the last one of the last public reviews, as I recall. Public comments just pretty much ignored.
They were never read.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, they were read, the comments I sent in August were read in third week of March, and then the fourth week of March, I told, well, sorry, it's too late to consider them.
That's my case.
So here we go. We were in the first few weeks of June, perhaps, and maybe we have a chance before we put that together. Maybe we have a chance to get something on the table. I don't know. It's just up to.
Brian has something.
I would suggest that you put this in the form of a motion, take a vote on whether people want to do it. And then I would also suggest, since this is another letter that's going to go under my signature, that if Mr. Cote has specific items that he'd like addressed in that letter, provide Michael with that information. He'll provide it to me and I'll incorporate it in the letter.
And then we'll bring it back next month for approval.
For review and approval.
I think we might get a quicker answer if we had Brad ask informally first.
I'm all for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, great idea.
Well, wouldn't we like to know if we have any standing with that group?
Well, I think that's, to that point, I think having Brad make an informal inquiry, that would tell us a lot, I think, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
he's gonna be inquiring it with her as to whether or not he could share those two chapters, so please will.
And we'll get something, if that goes well, we'll get something we can act on quicker.
Yeah, and you can't share the chapters, there's not much point.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, end the discussion basically at that point.
Does anybody want to make a motion to any effect?
I move that we ask.
Well, first of all, let me just say, except for you, Barbara, I can't understand being here properly. It's blurry.
Oh, sorry.
Any comments? I can sort of pick up the tone. Maybe that was Levoy speaking, because I can identify his voice in general. So I have no idea what was just said, but I'll leave it up to Levoy to if he wants to make a motion from my point of view, and we'll go from there.
Levoy?
Good motion. I'd like to move that we just have Brad make an inquiry as to our review and participation in the process of the manual vision.
Second that.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I think this is, John, I think this is a better way. This letter's going to take some time. We have to go, because of the old meeting, we better come back, do this and the other, and we can get a quick answer this way, I think.
Okay,
I
motion has
will
failed.
attempt to make that call today.
Thank you.
Okay. So, you put your proposed solution to processing delays on the June agenda. Recorder questions on the June agenda.
Question, we didn't finish talking about clarifying the situation regarding the answers to the questions.
That's what I just said, the recorder's questions
Yeah.
on the June agenda.
Well, no, we don't need to put them on the June agenda. We made a request, we didn't get an answer, and I'm requesting that the chairman follow up to get an answer to those questions, negotiate which questions are going to be answered. That's already old business. He didn't do it.
But the which questions is old business that hasn't
Well,
been
that's
reconsidered.
something,
That-
we don't need, we actually left that open to be able to negotiate with the recorder and to be able to get the conversation with Chris.
I think we went before that to eliminating some of the questions already.
There's no
because-
consensus on eliminating questions.
Well, I'm not in favor of all the questions that were asked, and I would
Well,
want to negotiate that among ourselves first.
And we're gonna discuss that. I'm gonna have to see the questions again. I don't have a copy anymore.
Yeah,
Well, then, would you please circulate the questions again, so
See if I can find them.
Okay.
Did
If
I,
you can, let me
did
know.
I miss something by being 2 minutes late calling in? I noticed it was 4:03 when it, or 9:03 when it hung up, when it connected.
No,
There was an item on the agenda, Barbara, for you to make comments about your conversations with the recorder. And I'm assuming that's to what you're referring right now.
yeah, Brian had conversation with the recorder. She was reluctant to speak to a small audience, to do her presentation to a small audience, especially since about half of us had already seen it, but he will talk with her further. Yeah.
I will draft a letter to the recorder that addresses both that issue and Arnie's questions. I will bring it to the meeting for approval of the text next month.
Can you move up here?
Yeah, I'll try to hear you, Brian.
Move up here. Brian's going to move up here with what he's saying.
Oh, I'm going to go sit.
Stand, whatever.
I will draft a letter to be presented to this group at next month's meeting that addresses both the presentation that Ann has made to several groups around the community, and getting her to come do that presentation here, as well as her willingness to address the questions that have been submitted to the county recorder, with the proviso that if she tells this commission to go pound sand, it's a dead issue at that point in time. If you want to pursue it further, you can pursue it on an individual level, but neither this commission nor the Board of Supervisors has any purview over the county recorder. I can't make her do anything. I can ask her, and if she says no, then she says no. If you want to pursue it further, then pursue it further as an individual. If that's unacceptable, let me know what you want done. But we keep barking up a tree that doesn't have a coon in it, and asking her to do something that she doesn't want to do for whatever reason, the Board of Supervisors can't make her do it. That's obvious in the relationship that they now have with the county assessor. So I'll formulate the letter, I'll bring it in for approval by this group, I'll send it to the recorder, and if she responds, she responds. If she doesn't respond, that's also her purview as an independent elected official.
If I may, Brian, refresh my memory, we had questions we were asking her. I don't remember a list of questions, but maybe
That list of questions has been floating around for approximately a year.
And it was about 3 pages long, single-spaced. And she
I
rejected,
see. Wow.
she rejected spending the
No wonder she
time.
didn't want to answer it.
Yeah. This is why we were proposing limiting it to a very few number of questions that were reasonable.
Actually,
Well, maybe we should do that. That approach to try to be reasonable is always the right thing to do, no matter what.
we have an approach to try to focus on what information we need to do our job. It depends on getting information from the recorder's office. And these are things that are not part of a presentation. So
Who did the original list? Was
a combined
that
list.
Chris or?
no, there are a few people involved.
Karen Schutte was the chair at that time, and she took comments from several people. I believe Arnie had something like, I don't remember, 2 pages maybe of questions, and then there was a few questions from other people. And she just sent them all unsorted as they were asked.
Well, I think I'd like to make a motion that as a group, we get the questions lined up. And I don't care who's in charge of that, but somebody ought to try and put those questions together, and we ought to agree that those are the questions, and then, and I don't think we should, I wouldn't agree necessarily with, I'm not here to pick on Karen because I don't know what her thoughts were when she made that decision, but we should probably approach it just a little more succinct than that, I would think.
Put it on the agenda for next meeting.
So let's put this all on the agenda for the next meeting.
I think that would be very appropriate.
Okay, so that's what I have here. Recorder, update on the city election by any of us who are participating in that. And, let's see. And John's proposed solution to processing delays on the next agenda. Anything else?
The list I have is proposed solutions to processing delay, city election information, letter to the recorder, and questions to the recorder. Those are the 4 items that I have down.
Those are-
Is that correct?
2, make just one a recorder.
Yeah, the letter in question.
Actually,
yeah.
I think the idea of having a separate discussion about the questions is a good idea, because
I'm just asking how you guys.
yeah, I think that would be
Okay.
a separate item, yeah.
Okay.
And if you can find the questions, send them to everybody.
I will do my best. It's 3 years ago, I believe, is when those questions came out. Is
If
Karen-
they're 3 years old, they might not even be germane anymore.
Oh, they do mean it.
I'll find it.
I will see what I can find.
Thank you. Okay, any other future agenda items?
We have to pack a lunch for next meeting.
Next meeting, June 21st.
All right.
Does that work?
That's fine with me.
I thought, I want to ask the question, I'm not there. I may have missed a part of the early stuff. Did we ever finish on our discussions, Levoy's thoughts about what does integrity mean?
That's not on the agenda.
The only agenda, that did put it on there this time intentionally because we had a pretty full agenda and we don't have a full board to discuss it. So we'll get it back on the
You want
agenda.
it on in the June agenda?
We can put it on there and then we'll see how the meeting goes. I don't want to stay here all day.
Okay, election, definite, how would
What does election integrity look like?
Anything
We have
else?
a pretty full agenda this week.
July meeting date?
July meeting date, July 19th. Anybody got a problem with that?
Nope.
Okay.
Before, after the meeting, but before you hang up, could I speak to Brad for just a second? It's hard to,
How about if we adjourn and then you speak to Brad?
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, okay, so anybody want to move for adjournment?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.